Hi everyone. My name's Regina Gorman. Welcome to FeForte and welcome to our discussion today. If you haven't heard of FeForte before, our mission is to build female resilience using science and philosophy. One of our key principles is to share knowledge. And today's conversation is one of the ways that we do this. So we've invited the wonderful Sam Eaton to join us today and talk a bit about her life experiences. You'll hear as we go through, she's found resilience through some particularly difficult times. As a warning, we will be discussing bereavement, domestic abuse and PTSD during today's conversation. So what we want is really for this to be informational, for this to be something that is potentially expands your thinking on different subjects, but also hopefully a bit inspirational as well, and you can take away some tips for how to find resilience in your own lives when you need it. So that's what we're hoping for today. Again, any questions, do feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll come off recording later to do a Q&A as well. So Sam is a business coach, has successfully run her own businesses in the past, and she's going to talk to us a little bit today about her life journey and, as I say, some of those difficult times and how she's come through those. Sam, I'll hand over to you if you're happy for you to tell us your story.
Yeah, morning everyone, or afternoon. It's 5 minutes past 12 after all. I hope we are all well today. It's strange times we're living in, and actually probably some of my experiences and strategies I used to help myself out are probably more relevant than ever before. We were saying earlier on before we came on this call what a bizarre time we are with lockdowns. It's all becoming a little bit too close to home. With everything that's happening, and also what we saw in the States, you just couldn't write what's happening now. And I feel like it's sort of been a little bit about what I've gone through in my life. So what I want to talk to you today about is things that have happened, some of the big things that have happened that have been far from pleasant, and then some of the strategies that I used to get myself out of it. And I think that's the important bit here. And before I go any further, in both these scenarios, I had a choice. I could either feel really sorry for myself and feel like the world had done me wrong, and in many instances it truly had, or I could feel this isn't going to happen to me. And that's the path I chose. And today I'm really proud of the path I chose. So let me begin. I had a really, really fabulous upbringing. Devoted parents who loved me, successful businesses, great schools, everything was going swimmingly well. And for those of you who are connected with me on LinkedIn, you'll see that on a few of my posts over the years, I managed to press, in some instances, my own self-destruct button, which doesn't help. But again, it's that accountability and finding accountability empowering rather than, oh, woe is me. It doesn't have to be that way. Many years ago, I was married for the second time. I'm a bit of a Joan Collins in that regard, and met what I thought was a super guy. And to put it in context, when I phoned up my mum with great glee to say that he'd proposed, my mum's response was, "Oh God, I had a headache before, now it's got worse." So that was really a sign of things to come. My mum was never backwards in coming forwards. Anyway, we were married for 7 years, and throughout that time, every once in a while, there were these sparks of sheer violence. But it was the emotional blackmail throughout that was really hard to deal with. There were also violent episodes in the evening. So when I was asleep, he'd say what he was going to do to me. And if I hadn't controlled my breathing and I hadn't stayed calm, I genuinely don't think I'd be here today. We had, if you like, a real come to Jesus moment, and he smashed up the walls. He said what he was going to do to me, and he smashed up the entire house. There was nothing here in his eyes, and I never ever want to see that look in another human being again. One thing I have learned is that fight or flight, I will always fight, but it possibly wasn't the best thing to do in this scenario. Me being me and the kind of person I was, I went to work the next day because, hey, that was last night. And things seemed to be okay until about 6 months later, where I just utterly fell apart. I felt like the world was coming down on me. I was suffocating. I was just couldn't lift myself up. I couldn't stop crying. I was in a really, really bad way. And that's just not me. For people who know me, it's not who I am. Friends were really good and realized I needed help. I was treated for PTSD for 6 months. And it was probably the best thing that had happened to me, because I was able to deal with so much. And some of the strategies I learned from there, I still use today. And these are great strategies, particularly now. So let me give you and share a couple of them with you. One particular session I had was when I was asked to replay what had happened to me, but as an onlooker. So as if I went to the cinema. So for all of us who are dealing with bad things right now, this may be really helpful. So place yourself in your cinema and look at the event as if you're watching it on a screen. It takes you out of it. And from there, once you've run it through in colour, run it through in black and white, reverse it, speed it up, slow it down. Once again, it gives you control of something that's really quite harrowing and awful. It also takes that feeling of pain, that feeling of out of control, because that's what this can feel like when you've been through something traumatic. It takes that away and gives you some form of control back. As I said, even today, even if it might be something bad that's happened at work, or unfortunately we know a few people who have passed or are about to pass with COVID right now, it's a great technique that we're using to help us through that. The other thing I learned at that time was to wear a cloak. So for example, whatever it is that keeps you safe and protects you when you're going into a difficult situation. For me, in wedding number one, back to Joan Collins, I had over my wedding dress, I wanted this beautiful long gold gown, as I said, very Joan Collins-esque, and it just fitted over the wedding dress. It cost an absolute fortune, but I felt fabulous in it. So when I'm going into a difficult situation, I put my gold cape on, and that's what I call it. So no one can touch me, no one can upset me. They can say what they like, but it's going to bounce off. And interestingly, when I've coached other business owners and they've got difficult decisions to make, or they're just feeling life is really tough, they've gone from anywhere from putting sparkly gold shoes on has been one, to actually just a baseball jacket or a cap. But it's something that protects them and makes them feel safe. And just that mental psychology behind, you can't touch me, and mentally feeling that you've got that on, has been a huge benefit to me, and I'm delighted that it's actually helped a lot of other people over the years as well. So after that incident, I had a number of years living by myself, and obviously went through a divorce, and many of my friends said to me I was determined to be single better than anyone else. I was spinning twice a day. I was learning languages. I'd be up at 4 o'clock in the morning hoovering, and I actually cut my edges with scissors because I had a Dingley Dell cottage. I did single well. And then a few years later, some friends of mine said, come on, it's about time. They introduced me to a lovely guy. And again, even that story, there's some hilarity around it as well. In that when we first met, we met on a Sunday. I'd been out with these specific friends on a Friday. Let's just say I had rather too much to drink, and we'd agreed to do a fun run on the Sunday. Now, not wanting to let my friends down, I felt particularly rubbish on the Saturday, and I had a chest infection coming. I decided to, again, maximize my time. I would put my cough mixture on the side of my bath. This is where things started to go horrifically wrong on that Sunday morning. I got up in time, like a machine. I went down to the bathroom, started to get changed, got washed, everything else, took a swig of said cough mixture, swallowed, and was violently ill. In my haste on the previous evening and in my preparations, I'd managed to put surgical spirit down instead of cough mixture.
No.
I turned up at this half run, still feeling dreadful, feeling particularly green round the gills. And my friend then turns around and says, "Oh, look, here's my friend Rad." Super guy, and the world just didn't seem to exist. But through the alcoholic sweats and the surgical spirit sweats and this general fear for having to do this run, I didn't really take much attention. Anyway, a few days later, he'd phoned up and we went out for dinner, and the rest, as they say, is history. We had a wonderful few years together. He was a super guy and everyone loved him. We never got married because of our ages. We thought children were more important. He'd started to have a few heart problems and we'd rushed him into hospital a couple of times. But we'd carried on exercising, and the last time, rather than give him an angiogram, the doctor who was leading the A&E that night had said, "Listen, I think you've just passed a heart muscle." Well, on August the 12th, which was my parents' golden wedding anniversary, he went out one day and never came back. I later had a police officer came to the door who said to me, "I'm really sorry, I regret to inform you that he died on the scene. He was just at a motorbike thing, which he loved. It wasn't an accident. It was a massive, massive heart attack." And my life sort of unraveled very quickly. All of a sudden, coroners and, identifying him and everything else became my norm. Preparing for a funeral, people avoiding me because, hey, not many people lost someone that suddenly in such a way in their early 40s. There were frequently police officers at the house taking statements and helping us through, because obviously we had liaison officers who helped us. But things were about to get even worse. We weren't married. And there were a whole load of legal things that were in place as well. So again, I was back at work within a month, but I was dealing with 3 sets of lawyers and probably had the biggest fight on in my life. As far as the law concerned, and all of a sudden my other half's family, I no longer mattered. They swarmed, they cleared the house out, and I was meant to understand this. This story, I later found out, isn't unusual. And actually, I was very lucky with what we were able to salvage, and we'd been fairly clever with some of our other areas in terms of protecting us. But I remembered about 3 or 4 months later, when I was back at work, someone asked me to go for a walk with them, and it was the lady I reported into, who then said to me that I wasn't performing at work. And actually, that was the best possible thing that happened to me. My fire ignited again. And rather than I'll show you, because that's never ever good, I'm so sorry.
You say your doorbell goes off. One of the joys of working from home is that at least you're there, but you can't predict when the doorbell's going to ring. Everyone that's on here, if you want to chat in questions as we go through, please do feel free.
I'm so sorry, you couldn't write that, could you? The second time she knocked as well, I was like, oh.
Yeah, gotta go.
And like I was saying, actually, that was the best possible thing that happened to me, because rather than get indignant and negative about it, it was, I will not be seen as this victim. I will not be seen as this person that's put in this box, either as a widow or someone who's failed, who can't do this. Because someone was putting a ceiling back in something and saying what I couldn't do. And I'm really sorry, I don't believe in that. You can do whatever you want to do in life. Mm. So yet again, I had to start all over again. I used all of the tools and everything else I'd learned from previous lives. And I put that in place. One of those things I learned to do was no longer care what people thought, either of me or my situation. That's your judgment. That's up to you to decide and think what you want to do. I also learned to listen more. And it's something I'd realised that people rarely do. It's difficult, isn't it, hearing a story like this? And I'm sure many of you can relate to the fact that, hey, you don't want to ask how someone is, which, by the way, isn't always a good way to do it. There are other ways of doing it. But it's just that whole thing about being able to communicate and talk. But what very few of us do is listen. And one of the things I vowed I would do is start talking to people that I wouldn't normally talk to. We're all easy for us, isn't it, to go and talk to people who look like us, who sound like us, who come from similar backgrounds. But one of the things I've learned most over the last few years is talking to those who don't. They don't think like me. They don't look like me. They don't come from my background. And particularly at networking events, those are the people I will now go to. And I've learned the most from. I also learned more humility. Rather than I've been through this, I've earned my stripes. Well, other people have been through other stuff too. So going back to that whole listening piece, that's been such a powerful insight. It goes back to that sort of diversity of thought and what you've been able to learn from there. And actually that is very much part of resilience, but it's not spoken about because there are other people who've dealt with things in other ways. And there is no one set way for resilience to follow through in your own resilience, if you like, because we all have our own journey when it comes to resilience. But the most important thing of all I learned was to share. Some people's stories are really, really difficult to hear. And it's okay to ask the questions. And that's another thing I've learned. And that also helps build our own resilience. Sometimes these things, some of the worst things that can happen, will really help us to understand and build that resilience for ourselves. Simple things like whatever that piece of clothing or item that you want to carry to help you with difficult conversations, or playing something on a video screen in front of you to help you deal with something and play that video back. The last thing that I learned that I wanted to share with you all today before we go to Q&A, which was hugely helpful to me. On one of my sessions, I learned that when we were born, we're all born with a body and a soul. And we get to the point of age of 3, and all of a sudden our mind kicks in and can be a real terrorist with us. So again, I've done lots of work with Bryony Kate, where she asks, is you to question and challenge yourself. Is this true? Is this really true, what I'm thinking? And so she's done some great work in that area. But one of the things I also learned was when my mind's sort of going away with me and running away with myself, and I can overthink things and I can get myself in a real stew when I want to, was actually to physically almost pick my brain up and put it somewhere. So me being me, in my mind, this looks like my sitting in a black Mini. Don't ask me why. I've never driven a black Mini. And my brain looks like a British bulldog with wings on it next to me. It is so bizarre and strange. It enables me to talk to it and for me to take back control of something that might not necessarily be true. As you can see, I've also put a bit of humor in it because for me, that's important. And it's enabled me sometimes to really challenge myself, even over day-to-day things that are quite minute and really don't have that much bearing or significance in the bigger picture. But hey, aren't those always the ones that make you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, either worrying, with a knot in your tummy, or stressing out or angry? But actually by creating that vision and having my mind as this bulldog with wings on it sitting next to me, it enables me to step back and challenge myself. So I found that by putting this protection cloak on me, being able to play the video back and trying to deal with particularly bad situations like that, and then putting my mind to my left in a car, it's given me the ability to take back control of my life. It's also given me the ability to actually see who and I want to be. And for me, it goes back to that really cheesy, I want to give back. Well, I wanted to give back in such a way that it would have value. And for me, I've used my expertise and experience as a business coach to change people's lives. It's enabled me to put me back in a really strong place. I'm privileged to know Georgie and work with her and to have met Jackie over the last few months. And it's actually by meeting people who've got equal stories and who you respect that continues to inspire and engage you as an individual. I feel I've done a lot of talking. And I just love to hear anyone's thoughts, if anyone's got any questions, if anyone's going through anything at the moment that they want to talk about, then hey, love to see from a resilience perspective how we can help.
Thank you so much, Sam. And anyone feel free to come off mute, come onto the audio. If you don't feel comfortable with that and prefer to chat in, do feel free. I can read them out from there. I know I've got a few questions buzzing around in my head, but I'll let our attendees start off if you'd prefer.
I've got one that I'd quite like to throw in the mix. I don't know if it's sort of the fact that I've been around a long time, but I've had a series of bereavements and difficult things that have happened. And one of the things that I learned was the first time you have a bereavement or something devastating happen to you, you think your life's over, that you're never going to get through it, that you're never going to survive. So that sort of absolute nothing is going to make me better ever. And I don't know if it's the same for you, Sam, but my second bereavement was equally as horrific, but I knew the difference was I knew I would get through it. I had that knowledge that I had that resilience in me, that somehow I would survive it. And therefore it gave me more resilience, even though you'd think it would be slightly more debilitating each time some sort of crucible of experience hit you. Did you experience that, or is that just a personal thing for me?
I did. I absolutely did experience that. And I think the other thing is doing things that make you feel good. Bizarrely, I joined a gospel choir and absolutely loved it. It was a great distraction for me. And they do say things like that are really, really helpful. And it goes back to, you know, that journey to recovery can take 2 to 3 years. And that's absolutely fine for that to happen. But it's about doing things along the way that are good for the soul, really. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Jackie. It's the resilience grows rather than
that's a really interesting one. I went back to horse riding after my second bereavement. It was like I have to do something different. I have to engage with something that makes me happy. And yeah, I went back to riding horses, got my own horses, met new people, met a new partner. It's interesting how getting back on the horse, if you'll excuse the metaphor, actually gets easier with time, I think.
Absolutely.
It's such a cliche, isn't it?
But it's so true.
Yeah.
Fab. Feel free to, as I say, anyone else wants to come onto the audio line. Sam, and there's a few specific questions coming up in my mind from your story. What did your mum see? Like, what was, you know, you mentioned in your unfortunate relationship, and when you said to her, you know, we're engaged, and she was, you know, her headache got worse. Was there a sign, or was there something that she had seen that you look back and think, oh yeah, I can see why she had that reaction? Or was it just, you know, gut feeling or something specific?
I think she'd seen something in his behavior that possibly I hadn't noticed. And again, it comes with experience, doesn't it? You know, when I look back on it now and you see certain people, you see traits, and again, it goes back to a bias, doesn't it? Whilst you try to remain open, I always think your gut instinct is, your initial instinct tends to be the right instinct. But yeah, she'd seen something in his behavior that I hadn't. And again, it goes back to her being around a little bit longer than I have. Hey, can I ask everyone a question who's on today?
Yeah.
Go.
What's piqued everyone's interest to come on today, and what do they want to come away from today with?
You can chat in if that's easier. Just put it in the chat.
Hi. For me, I was really interested to know about your story. I think the introduction that Georgina gave us on the FeForte sort of lead up to you was really interesting. But from a resilience point of view, I think the story of sort of going through your trials and tribulations kind of resonated with me. I've not experienced anything as dramatic as you have, but I think certainly over the past, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, there have been a number of incidents that have sort of triggered my resilience. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, really.
Good. And has it helped, Sarah?
Absolutely. It's fantastic. What an inspiration. Yeah.
Good. Thank
those
you.
tips that you've shared, Sam, I think are incredibly helpful.
Really? Mm-hmm.
And they do
I think we all need a gold cloak.
Yeah.
I love how quintessentially British is your riding in a Mini with a bulldog next to you. Where were you when you came up with that?
I have no idea. I mean, it's the wonderful world of Sam. You know, I've had many people over the years say Planet Sam must be an awesome place. I mean, it's freaking awesome, I can tell you that. But yeah, it's just, it works.
I just hit, and forgive me if it's inappropriate on a call that's your story, but I'm just hit by so many similarities, because I have a bell jar that I used to have if I was going into a particularly tricky presentation with quite difficult corporates, that I would have a bell jar coming down. I'd close my eyes and I'd visualize this bell jar coming down over my head, and then any arrows bouncing off the bell jar. And as it was coming down, I'd have the music from Mission Impossible. So it was going dun 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 dun, dun. And it's like, that is so spooky that you have this cloak and I have a bell jar. But
I tell you what, if you combine the two, it'll be invincible.
I'm trying to think of something that I could use that's equally as exciting.
Got a high bar now. And for everyone on the call, they are, all these things are visualization techniques, and we do if you've already been part of a cohort or you're thinking about joining a future cohort, we do go through some of the techniques that you can use to improve your confidence. And visualization and power poses, things like that, do come into play when you think about confidence and resilience and getting through difficult situations. From what it sounds like, those, both of those techniques really are creating that feeling around you, which you then absorb and you can take forward and use that energy in whatever you're about to face. Just to draw attention to the chat, Mia said she's joining just to listen and learn, which is wonderful, Mia. That's absolutely fine. And I think that's Louisa. I remember your handle. Agreed. I think with COVID, we are seeing increases in domestic violence, and as employers, we need to help to recognise the signs so we can support. I wonder, Sam, is there anything you could talk to around that? You said you'd gone into work the next day after those instances of extreme violence from your partner. Was there anything that perhaps people could have noticed or had noticed, or did anyone have a conversation with you at the time noticing any differences?
I think I'm a parallel thinker, so I've got 7 or 8 things going on in my head at any one time, which is never a good thing, to be honest. But I became mithered very quickly. I was a bit of a busy fool, if I'm honest. And actually, you hear it time and time again these days, which isn't, why is your performance dropped? It's, hey, I just want to check in with you and see what's happening. And it may well be that person doesn't say anything, because what I've found subsequently over the years is actually invariably these are strong women who stay. Because you can't believe it's happening to you. You cannot believe that you're in fear in your own home, both mentally and physically. And you're trying to control that to the best of your ability. And therefore you think you're maintaining your strength, which you are. there's a certain amount of female pride here as well, which is, I'm better than this. No, this can't be happening. This cannot be happening to me. And it's only when it gets to such a bad point that reality bites and something dramatic has to happen. So it's about constantly checking in, and it may well be that you know what's going on and you can sense what's going on. If it's something that's extremely violent, then of course something needs to be done, and it's handling that carefully. But actually just checking in with someone and saying, hey, how are you? Is everything okay? What's happening in your world? That just gives someone that opportunity to start to open up and talk. They may well talk about absolutely nothing, but at least you're opening up that channel to talk.
I think what you said earlier is very useful as well, that your experience, you actually learnt to listen more. And I think the reason that mothers pick up on bad partners is they're always watching and listening to their children. This isn't my story, but my husband's mother cried at his first wedding because she didn't want him to marry the woman he was marrying, and she was abusive physically and verbally and emotionally, and his mother saw that. And I just think that mothers focus on their children, and as employers, I'm not suggesting we should be behaving like everybody's parents, but it's that if something seems off with someone, actually noticing and listening between what they're saying. I think you've obviously raised those skills as part of your resilience toolkit, and that's why you're a great coach. And it's the same thing as employers. We need to be aware that something's going on and really listen to people and what they're not saying as much as what they are saying.
And Jackie, you've hit the nail on the head right there. It's what they're not saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it might well be that someone's drinking more than usual and you can smell it off them. It might be there's telltale signs. They're looking tired. They get flustered more at the slightest things. The telltale signs are always there. And let's not forget, as you so rightly say, Jackie, it works the other way around. The number of men, again, I've subsequently come across, who have been abused by their wives.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, you know, the men who feel that they're providers and they're there to provide support and be the protector, and actually they're the ones who become the victims. That's equally hard to deal with other ramifications, obviously, from that. But as you know, I'm a great believer, let's not forget this works both ways.
Absolutely. And I think, Sam, here, you know, your advice there works specifically for if you're an employer and you suspect that someone may be struggling with domestic violence at home. I think also just in general at the moment, everyone has a story to tell. Everyone is going through something. And, you know, we are living in a world at the moment where everyone's home lives are so difficult and so different. And our home lives are now our work lives for the majority of people. So I think if you're in a situation where you are an employer or in a team or a colleague, opening up that conversation with, as you said, Sam, how are you? What's going on for you in your world at the moment? No one is okay at the moment. We're all going through the day going, yeah, we're okay, we're fine, we're getting through. We are getting through with, you know, hopefully surviving, but it's a really difficult time. And just to say, you know, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm okay, move on, isn't really scratching the surface. So I think regardless of whether it's specifically domestic violence you suspect or whether it's just that someone isn't themselves right now, have that extra level of conversation where it's what is going on for you right now, how are you feeling, look, all cards on the table, it's a shit situation, excuse my French, let's not call it any other way, this is tough, can I help, is, you know, and hopefully people are asking you the same question as well if you're in that situation.
Yeah, and funny enough, it's interesting. One of the best things that someone said after he died was, it was one of my great friend's husbands, who just says it how it is. And I love him dearly for it. He came up to me and he said, "This is shit, isn't it?"
Yeah.
And actually, I just wanted someone to be that raw and just say it how it was. And subsequently, over the years, when other people have lost people close to them, or they're going through some, they've got a horrific disease, I've said to them, rather than try and help and make it better, say to them, "I know I can't make this better and this is shit, but what do you need me to do?"
Yeah.
And actually, that's much more straight talking. And the person who's receiving and who's going through it will probably go, "Thank goodness, I just needed someone to say that."
Yeah. Rather than pretending that everything's okay or that we're just pushing through, it's like just own it.
Yeah, because there's some things you just can't fix.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyone on the line, if that's resonated with you, if you've got any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat or jump on. Hi, Leonie.
Hi, Leonie.
Yeah, I think you can hear
No
me.
pressure, but you've come on camera, so you've got to talk now.
I know. I also wanted to thank you, Sam, for sharing your experience. And to your earlier question, I mean, it's my very first meeting with FeForte, so thank you, Gina, for inviting me, and I think it's kind of marks the starting point, and also for later on for the new cohort. So, and I think similar to the comment earlier, I'm just really interested to listen and learn, and I think there's great power while I ultimately joined this meeting when expertise is shared and things that are very difficult to talk over. If someone starts to initiate the talk, obviously then it becomes easier for others to talk as well. So thank you for sharing. And I do have actually a question as well, which is related to taking back control. You've mentioned that so often, and it resonated quite a lot with me. And I wanted to ask you to what extent it was something that you newly learned, or you kind of had to re-engage of like learning it in the new situation again, and how that evolved with you.
Okay. So it was something that was newly learnt in each scenario, because each scenario was different and the emotions in each was different. And as I said, the using it, the combination of the skills, definitely that cloak, and when small things would get to me, using the cinema scenario or playing it on a video handheld camera, however I chose to do it, was really helpful. So they were techniques that helped me have control. And one of the things I'd learned that I had done, and one of my weaknesses, was I cared too much about what people thought. So I let it go. Which was, I actually don't care what X, Y, and Z think about me. But what I do care about is that I earn your respect. And one of my mantras now is respect is earned. It's not a God-given right. And once it's earned, it can still be lost. So you need to continue to earn that right. Again, that's something that's really empowering, and it's helped me with my resilience, because it means that I can be authentic and share my views in difficult and challenging situations. I no longer am a pleaser, which I always used to do, which got me in terrible trouble because I wanted everyone to be happy. Well, it doesn't happen. But what you can do with clear communication is, rather than "I'm sorry, I disagree with you," well, my thoughts on this is X, Y, and Z. And I'm thinking that because ... So you're not apologizing, you're not being the crowd pleaser, you're explaining your position without being combative, and doing it in such a way that you're giving context behind it as well. And I think all of those tools really help me to get control back rather than giving control away.
Great. Okay.
Does that help, Yoni?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's, I can relate to it. Yeah, there's a few examples that come up in my mind as you said it. So yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
Louise has just dropped in the chat that she unfortunately needs to drop off, but really inspiring session. Thanks so much to Sam for sharing.
Oh,
Thank you,
pleasure.
Sam, to
No
pass on to
problem.
you.
Louisa?
Anyone else on the line that has any questions? Any other thoughts? Anything just bubbling up for you? It doesn't need to be a specific question, Sam, just anything that's coming to mind.
I do think the playing back the scenario and removing yourself from the situation, I think that's quite a useful tool if you can actually, you know, develop that as a thing. I've heard that before, actually. I'm not quite sure where, but yeah, I think that's
really helpful.
a good one. Yeah.
Leonie, were you part of the cohort? I'm sorry, I should know this, and Georgina will know.
Leonie's about to join on the 20th.
You're coming on the next one. Okay, but the whole area of control is one of the things that we pick up on around the existential fears that we have, and there's quite a lot of neuroscience around that too. So we'll dig into that a bit more on the cohort.
Okay, that's great.
That's
Yes,
helpful.
I mean, I can imagine it's something that is does often not come so natural, and I've just experienced over time that there are people that it does come very kind of immediate, and then others really not, and struggle a lot with that. So there's big differences in kind of how you see yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, great, looking forward to it.
Good. We look forward to having you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Wonderful. So, excuse me, I'm not seeing any more comments in the chat. Again, kind of final call for anyone to jump off of the, jump on the audio line if you have any further comments or questions. I feel like I need a gavel, like 3, 2, 1. Cool. Feel free to keep them coming as we wrap up, and if anything comes to you after the session, you've got my email address from the calendar invitation, so feel free to pop over any questions. We can follow up after. Sam, any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I think the main one is we've spoken to all our clients between last week and this week, and again, it's really just control the controllables. We're living in a world that's completely out of control right now. But also, let's not forget that when we do go through change, there's huge opportunity. So yes, physically and mentally and everything else, this is tough, but there's masses of opportunity for out there right now. We've thrown away the rule book. We no longer have to live by a certain way. We can create our own futures. We can create our own networks. We can create who we want to be, and we can do it now. So it's now tough. Yes, it is. But is it an opportunity? It's a massive opportunity. I know we can't always see that when it's raining outside and it's dark and we're stuck at home and the news is dreary and everything that's happening in the world. But let's just take a step back and look at what we do have and look at what we can and will achieve in 2021.
What inspiring words to end on. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing all of your experiences so candidly today, and also for giving some of those brilliant tips for us all to help build our resilience as we go forward. I hope everyone is thinking about what they can wrap themselves in, whether it be that gold cloak or the baseball jacket or whatever else it may be that helps you build resilience. If you haven't already checked out FeForte, please do check out our website where you can learn more, and you can learn some more tips as well on any of our training programs to help build your resilience for everyday life, but also through some difficult times as well. Thank you so much, Sam, for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Thank you for joining us on the line. Again, we'll stay on for a couple of minutes now. We'll turn off the recording. So if you do have any questions and you prefer to ask them now, please feel free. If not, we hope to see you again really soon.
Take care, everyone.